Hello and welcome to News at 10 on NTA News 24. I am Tessie Umeri. Thank you for joining us. We begin with headlines. World Trade Organization promises support for Nigeria's efforts at developing COVID-19 vaccines. Nigeria and Burundi resolve to deepen and expand existing bilateral relations. Plus, President Buhari seeks amendment of the Petroleum Industry Act as House of Representatives faces for exemption of the police from contributory pension reforms. Those were the headlines. Now the major events. The World Trade Organization WTO has promised to support Nigeria in its efforts at developing and manufacturing of COVID-19 vaccines. Director General of the organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, made this known while speaking to newsmen after an audience with President Muhammadu Buhari on the margins of the UN General Assembly in New York. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo reports.
The Director General of the World Trade Organization, Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, briefed President Muhammadu Buhari on the serious reforms being implemented to get the organization back on track. She solicited the support of the President in this regard, especially on some of the negotiations relating to fisheries development, health, and in particular, the battle against COVID-19.
The fact that on the African continent, less than 4% of us have been vaccinated, whereas in the rich countries, close to 58% have been vaccinated, is not something that really is good for the world. Why? Because we have all these variants that are circulating. And if you don't vaccinate people, they'll just migrate from unvaccinated to the vaccinated. So what we're saying is, in order to solve this problem, we have to produce more vaccines, and then we have to distribute them equitably to parts of the world that don't have. And that's the narrative. At the WTO, what we're doing is actually working directly with the manufacturers. We're helping them monitor their supply chains, which are very complicated, to see what are the bottlenecks they have, what are the regulatory issues they face, how can we facilitate trade. In return, we're asking them to deconcentrate production on the African continent. We don't want to continue importing 99% of vaccines that we use. We're also looking at Nigeria. We're the largest country, and His Excellency Mr. President also wants to develop manufacturing. So we want to support that. We've been working with the Honorable Minister of Health to see what we can attract, the investment we can attract to Nigeria.
Inequity in access to the COVID-19 vaccines, Dr. Okonjo-Iweala emphasized, is not acceptable.
Vaccines are like a public good. So they also need investment from the government to match part of what the private sector is doing. We need demand. Vaccine producers will not produce unless they know that the vaccines are going to be purchased. And so, the fact if Nigeria can aggregate its demand, then that will help to persuade them to invest. And I think the Honorable Minister of Health is leading a task force of which I'm a member. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is a member, Kia Adeshino, and Mohammed Pate. We're all trying to help from the outside to see how we can move things for investment.
The Director General is optimistic that within the next 2 to 3 years, the fruits of this labor will be reaped. From New York, Adamu Sambo, NTA News.
Nigeria and the Republic of Burundi have resolved to deepen and expand existing bilateral relations between the two countries in the greater interest of their people and economies. This came to light when President Muhammadu Buhari received in audience his Burundian counterpart, President Evariste Ndayishimiye, on the margins of the 76th United Nations General Assembly holding in New York. The Burundi leader informed President Buhari that peace is fully restored in his country and reconciliation is ongoing. He said Burundi is looking for support from friendly nations towards exploiting the vast opportunities that abound, especially in agriculture, oil supply and mining. President Buhari pledged Nigeria's support and assistance to what he called the broader African country. United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed says the world needs to be doing better in applying the solutions to sustainable development. She said this at the Pathways and Partners Dialogue on localizing the SDGs on the sidelines of the United Nations 76th General Assembly underway in New York. Onenge Fineface reports.
And you're going to say to me now, what about poor people? Please don't underestimate how far people in Africa have gone with connectivity.
For the United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, there's improvement in information about the Sustainable Development Goals. What is lacking, however, is the localization of the targets for positive action at individual and community levels, because many people do not understand how they are related to the SDGs.
Just the mobile phone alone, that you can have almost cashless societies in one or two countries with the phone. So I think things need to be scaled up. We need to do them in a hurry. We have to stop thinking poorly for the poor. Be as ambitious as you and I are privileged to be.
The SDGs are said to have the capacity to address the world's most pressing challenges.
Everybody can get covered, but we need the supplies. And then governments, local to national, around the world, make your SDG plans. Part of our job is to help you get the financing that you need. So the bottom up, the top down, let's get this done. That's the key.
To this effect, the United Nations is launching the Local 2030 initiative to create a network of global, national and local partners to facilitate innovative solutions. Onengiye Fineface, NTA News.
And statistics from International Labour Organization shows that 54 million women lost their jobs between 2019 and 2020 due to caregiving crisis occasioned by COVID-19 pandemic. Uche Ugochukwu reports that on the sideline of the 76th UN General Assembly in New York, champions of gender equality tabled actionable solutions.
COVID-19 pandemic negatively affected women in all spheres. Many are out of jobs, and there are projections that 2 million more will lose their jobs this 2021. These gender equality champions are worried that despite these challenges, only 11% of policies globally address women's unpaid care at work as countries boost social protection, while saying that COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down telecom progress of efforts aimed at achieving the 2030 target of the Sustainable Development Goals.
The gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is integral to all priorities. It is, in fact, the key priority in all our development efforts. To recover from COVID-19, or to accelerate and achieve the SDGs, or to ensure peaceful, prosperous societies.
They suggested that as countries gradually move from COVID-19 response to recovery, they should invest more in good social protection programs for women, caregiving, and data collection, so as to get a full and just economy.
We need to look at this barrier and figure out what is good policy that can help women with that unpaid care so that they can do what they want and return to their jobs.
The panelists are of the view that efforts at ensuring gender equality must be prioritized for the world to achieve a holistic economic recovery. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
And still talking women issues, it has been over 2 years since the International Labour Organization ILO Convention 190 on Violence and Harassment and Elimination of Gender-Based Violence GBV was adopted at the ILO centenary, but Nigeria is yet to ratify its tripartite. Constituents are meeting to put finishing touches to the first international treaty expected to guarantee the rights of every worker at the workplace. Emmanuel Anyimiro reports.
In 2019, Workers' representatives dominated the United Nations building in Geneva to seek an end to violence against workers, which gained a swift acceptance and adoption during the ILO centenary celebration in Switzerland, since eliminating violence and harassment at the workplace is critical to achieving SDGs 5 and 8 of the 2030 agenda. While some African countries have ratified ILO Convention C-190, Nigeria's tripartite constituents working on the reviews of policies and legislation say violence and harassment are unacceptable and incompatible with decent work.
The convention represents a historic opportunity to shape a future of work based on dignity and respect for all.
The convention calls for measures to be taken to recognize and mitigate the effects of domestic violence in the world of work.
These steps being taken are required by the ILO for the tripartite constituents to build an inclusive gender response approach that will promote a culture of social dialogue and workplace cooperation, key to preventing labor crisis. Emmanuel Ayemiro, NTA News.
In furtherance of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs seeking to promote economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental protection, governments in Africa must ensure that engaging the continent's rapidly growing youth population through jobs and other opportunities remains its central priority. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo stated this at the virtual launch of the United Nations Global Compact Africa Strategy, an initiative of the United Nations to galvanize private sector participation in the actualization of the SDGs, Africa's private sector. The Vice President said must also scale up its contribution to the continent's economic and social transformation, stressing that as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement enters into force, African businesses have a historic opportunity to embrace sustainability and be part of the collective effort to build a more sustainable and inclusive future. Welcoming the establishment of the new UN Global Compact Africa Hub in Abuja next year to coordinate and drive the implementation of the strategy on the continent. The VP expressed his support for the new Africa strategy, particularly for its focus on SMEs, youth and women to ensure that no one is left behind on the journey towards achieving sustainable and inclusive development. It is important to ensure that all Nigerians have clear understanding of the federal government's Human Capital Development Program objectives and its relevance to Nigerians. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo said this in a message delivered by Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, Ade Ipaye, at a Human Capital Development Communication Strategy that is validation meeting in Abuja. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports.
Human capital is really the most important asset that Nigeria has. And this you all know, but it's something that we have to reiterate.
And that is how the outside world see Nigeria, a nation with an estimated population of about 200 million people. Human capital is considered as Nigerians' greatest resource, but which potential is yet to be realized. And they wondered why.
Until and unless our political leaders realize the imperative of taking very difficult decisions for today so that generations will benefit, will not make any progress.
It is time to do the right thing, even at a price. Governor El-Rufai says, and part of that is showing the political will towards investing more in education and health and other areas that can lead to human development. The unveiling of this Human Capital Development logo marks the beginning of great things to come, as the federal government, working in collaboration with all stakeholders, is determined to change the narrative.
We cannot do this quietly all the time, even though many of us would wish we could. People have to know what we are doing. Stakeholders have to be carried along, and the effect have to be so visible.
To execute this Human Capital Development Program by the National Economic Council,
chaired by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, a co-working group established with a mandate to develop a national human capital development strategy.
It is not about federal government, it is not about the states, it is not about the development partners, it is about all of us. Let's have that partnership that would make this happen.
It will have health, plus education, plus skills, plus capabilities. 4 parts. Anything you do amongst those 4 things would allow you to improve human capital.
We will need to show how education pays. It is this translation and this rubbing of minds between us and our public that actually would be key.
This event by the co-working group is to unveil the communications strategy to ensure that all Nigerians fully understand the program and to own it. From the banquet hall of the State House, Jide Onifade, NTA News.
You've been watching the news at 10 on NTA News 24. Ahead in the news, Senate advises the Nigerian Television Authority to devise effective scheme for the recovery of its debts. Details when we return.
This is NTA News 24 broadcasting from Abuja. You can watch us anywhere, anytime on the following platforms. For more information, log on to our website www.nta.ng or join us on our social media handles, Twitter at NTA News 24, Facebook at NTA News 24.
For comments, suggestions and inquiries, send an email to news24@nta.gov.ng or call us on the following numbers.
NTA News 24, news and more news.
Many thanks for staying with us. President Muhammadu Buhari has written to Senate requesting the amendment of the administrative structure of the Petroleum Industry Act recently signed into law. National Assembly correspondent Ignatius Nko reports that the amendment bill seeks to ensure federal character principle and to strengthen the administrative machinery of the new oil sector regime.
Plenary took off with President of the Senate, Ahmad Lawan, reading executive communications from President Muhammadu Buhari. One of the presidential letters is requesting the amendment of the Petroleum Industry Act, which seeks to expand membership of the board of the 2 regulatory institutions and to exclude the ministers of petroleum resources and that of finance from the membership of the 2 institutions.
Removal of the ministers of petroleum and finance from the board of the 2 institutions. The proposed amendment will increase the membership of the board from 9 to 13 members, that is representing 44% expansion of the board size.
The president also forwarded names of 4 persons as members of the board of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, including that of George Abang Ebungu as secretary. 4 members of the board of the Upstream Regulatory Commission, with Isa Ibrahim Modibo as chairman, and also 4 persons as members of the board of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Idaire Kogo Ogan is to serve as chairman. The National Toll-Free Emergency Number Establishment Bill, sponsored by Senator Ibikule Amosun, Sickle Cell Anemia Prevention, Control and Management Bill by Senator Sam Egu, and the Federal Orthopedic Hospital Dekina Establishment Bill, sponsored by Senator Issa Jibrin, were passed. The legal framework for the establishment of the Federal Medical Center Diba, Gombe State, sponsored by Senator Danjuma Goje, punishment of the offenses of abduction and wrongful restraint by Senator Ibikule Amosun, and the Federal College of Education, Basambiri, Bayelsa State Establishment Bill, sponsored by Senator Bia Borokuma Degieremiowo, passed second reading.
To support and provide an enabling environment for medical training of personnel as the board may consider necessary.
By ensuring that recipients of any proceeds of the act of kidnapping are heavily sanctioned with terms of imprisonment of up to 30 years.
Nembe and branch local government areas, out of the 8 local government areas, are the only local government areas without a federal educational institution, secondary or tertiary.
Senate paid tribute to late former Deputy President of the Senate, Ibrahim Mantu, and late Olabiyi Durojaye as moved by Senators Stephanus Gyang and Olalekan Mustafa. From the National Assembly, Ignatius Nkwo, NTA News.
And still from the National Assembly, Senate Committee on Public Accounts has advised the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, to devise an effective debt recovery scheme to ensure that it recovers debt due for the services it provided several customers. Chairman of the committee, Matthew, who said this, also announced the vacation of queries by Office of the Auditor General of NTA for 2016 and 2018 financial year. Mobolaji Moribirin has to report.
Senate Public Accounts Committee has been inviting ministries, departments and agencies before its annual recess. At its resumed investigative hearing over queries by the Auditor General for the Federation, the Director General of the Nigerian Television Authority is before the committee to explain and clarify on issues in the year 2016 to 2018 financial report. The Director General, while acknowledging some of the infractions, noted that though inexcusable, they occurred as a result of the authority's peculiar line of business, which involves meeting deadlines.
The trade debtors arose from credit given to advertising agencies in line with the advertising practice. Efforts are already being made to recover the outstanding sums. However, most of the agencies have folded up, and we have written a series of letters to the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria, BORN, and the Advertising Practitioners Council of Nigeria, APCON.
The Director General further said that those institutions and agencies that are heavily indebted to the NTA and have consistently refused to pay will be blacklisted and will be treated on a cash and carry basis only. With the peculiarity of managing media organizations, the committee observed that the perceived infractions by the Nigerian Television Authority was for a good cause.
We're going to resolve it in your favor. On behalf of the committee, we want to respect that wish. We'll vacate that query.
The committee adjourned with expectations that more ministries, departments and agencies will appear before it. From the National Assembly, Mobolaji Moribiri, NTA News.
Senate has promised a comprehensive and holistic approach to all identified challenges facing the contributory pension scheme in Nigeria. Deputy Minority Whip of the Senate gave this assurance while addressing the Nigerian police retirees under the scheme in Abuja. Dayo Ogunshola has more.
This is not the first time members of the Nigerian police retirees will be converging on the National Assembly to presume their demands. But the presence of members from 27 states of the Federation makes this an issue of general concern.
Nobody here will say that is comfortable with the contributory pension scheme. No. I retired as the Chief Lieutenant of Police. What they pay me today is 42,000. I'm even lucky.
We are supposed to be kept in the reserve bench, pacified. Then the authority will always fall back to earn from our experiences.
President of the Senate, Ahmad Lawan, represented by Senate Deputy Minority Whip, assured the retirees the Senate is more than ready to address the issue in contention for the benefit of all Nigerians.
Your own bit is to ensure that what we require as input is also made available to the committee and by extension to the National Assembly. The National Assembly will ensure that you get justice, the justice that you deserve.
Sit down, condense the whole, that's the act, the Pension Act, and then when you're making your input, you make sure everything has been captured in that presentation. It is, I assure you, it is what we are going to use as a guidance on the amendment on the floor of the Senate.
The men have been agitating that they should be removed from the contributing pensions, just like other security agencies in Nigeria. From the National Assembly, Dayo Ogunshola, NTA News.
The House of Representatives is working on a legislation that will exempt the Nigerian police force from the contributory pension scheme. National Assembly correspondent Lami Ali reports that the bill received overwhelming support from House members as it passed second reading.
Leading the debate on the bill, which seeks to amend Section 5, subsection 1
of the Pension Reform Act, sponsor of the bill, Ejirogene Waive, says the act is unfair to the police.
An assistant superintendent of police, for example, gets 1.5 million, whereas his counterparts in the military, the intelligence services that are not in the scheme, get much more than that, 12.8. But the worst thing is that even at retirement, the police still don't get this meager sum under the contributory scheme.
As a CSP, Colonel equivalent, I collect 23,000 naira, Mr. Speaker. 23,000 naira after serving 15 years.
Those privileges that is enjoyed by the military should be enjoyed by the police.
It is long overdue that our policemen should be treated with dignity.
The country should be able to sacrifice whatever is required for those servicemen. And we cannot be seen to put our policemen in jeopardy.
The lawmakers also gave support to the motion from Saidu Bargaja, which urged authorities to provide relief materials to victims of insurgency at Isa and Sabon Birni in Sokoto State.
The returning in Isa and Sabon Birni Frere constituency are living in abject poverty and suffering.
House members adopted a motion from Haruna Dederi calling for intensified efforts to prevent bandits fleeing military operations from setting up camp in other locations, as is being witnessed in boundary villages of Rogo, Kano State. The motion from Jafar Ribadu demanding the relocation of the Yola Correctional Center in Adamawa State to its new site was also adopted.
It's a lot of discomfort for the residents and visitors due to the frequent roadblock, especially in terms of rampage by inmates or anticipated attack by insurgents.
Meanwhile, the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, has brought to the notice of members an executive communication seeking amendments of the Petroleum Industry Act recently signed into law. From the National Assembly, Lami Ali, NTA News.
You're still watching the news at 10 on NTA News 24. We have more reports when we return. Stay with us.